Okay, and welcome to this broadcast, everyone. This is AnnaLaura Brown, and Liz Wootten and I decided that we would get together and do this broadcast to talk about food intolerances and food sensitivities, as we have both had some similar issues there. So, Liz, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about who you are and your story?
Okay, well, my name's Liz Wootten. I live in Scotland at the moment, and for a living, I am a small business coach. I came to that really through my own work, my own small businesses, which I've run in the past. And what I found over the years that I was doing that was that a lot of people don't realize essentially that a lot of the reason why small businesses don't work out is not just because they have a product or a service that nobody wants or a really bad idea or something, but actually a lot of the time it's down to things like bad planning or lack of focus. They don't set goals. Sometimes even just don't understand money, or they're focusing on being creative or whatever, and not focusing on some of the really important stuff. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized how much of that is down to really, in a sense, a lack of personal development or a lack of personal effectiveness. So, where you've got somebody who's really, who's like a big picture thinker, they have all the big ideas and everything, but they maybe find it hard to focus on money, because that's kind of boring. I don't want to sit down and do that. But having a handle on your finances when you run a business is kind of important, right? So, so I started to look at some of the reasons why people weren't focusing on some of the important stuff in their businesses. And I realized that there was a huge area for development for a lot of people, because, these things aren't rocket science. It's not because they're difficult necessarily. It's not, and sometimes it's not because people don't have the knowledge, but it's just because they haven't worked out how they themselves can do this or fit it into their lives in a better way, right? Things like stress can be enormous, and when you run your own business, stress is kind of an inevitable, unavoidable part of that. You can't just avoid the stress completely. You have difficult customers, sometimes you have poor cash flow, there's all kinds of reasons why running a business is stressful. Sometimes just trying to fit it around your family can be really hard. So I started to develop techniques and strategies for people to help them deal with stress, to become more resilient to stress, to learn how to manage their time in a more productive way, to get more done, and to find ways to help people who are really creative and so on to find ways to do the things that they don't really like to do, to find the motivation to do them, and to get much more positive about their businesses, and about themselves as well. The more positive you can be as a person, the more you can achieve, and essentially the more successful you can be. So that's really what I do in a nutshell. I actually work with my husband. I feel very lucky to be able to do that. And we have an 11-year-old son as well, who actually is quite a big part of why I'm talking to you today, because I think if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be as aware of food intolerance as I am. So we'll get onto that, I'm sure. But I would love to know more about you, AnnaLaura, because we've met once, and I would love to know more about what you do and how you got where you are.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, I have actually been in business part-time for probably about 9 years now, and I originally started out, I was in a direct selling company that was doing candles and cosmetics, did that for about 6 years, and then just kind of the passion to do that just kind of died. Didn't really want to do that so much anymore. And then I backtracked to about 2 years before this, while I was still in that other business. I had lots of coughing issues and had been diagnosed with asthma and could never really get it under control. I was on inhalers, I tried different things, nothing was really working for me, and I met a lady out networking with my other company who had an essential oil blend that she said could help with asthma, and I thought, okay, well, I'll try this. So I started trying it, and long story short, I made some other dietary changes, like I stopped drinking cow's milk, which a lot of people don't realize that actually creates mucus and can actually make your asthma worse. So I quit doing that and started using this essential oil blend, and I was able to get off my asthma inhalers and haven't been on them in about 5 years now.
Wow.
So I kind of, at the point, came to that crossroads where I wanted to switch and do something else. So I got into the essential oils business, but then I'm also into, helping people with their health and lifestyle changes and all that kinds of things. And was doing it part-time up until about 2 months ago when I actually got terminated from my job. So now I'm kind of like, okay, this is it. Just go do this full time. I'm just much more passionate about this. You know what? Who really needs or really wants another job? But anyway, backtrack to probably about a year ago. This is when I first started to realize the impact that food intolerances can have on people and their health. I was, at that time still working my full-time job and trying to do my business part-time, but I was sick all the time. And it was like, I'm the one that's supposed to be the health coach, the one that's supposed to be the example to people of how to have good health, yet I didn't have good health. I would catch every bug you can think of. Every time somebody was sick, it was almost like, oh, don't breathe on me at all or I'll get that sickness, and I had dizziness, I had a lot of symptoms of thyroid issues, I was tired all the time, I had muscle aches and pains everywhere, and it was like I had what I thought were a lot of the symptoms of fibromyalgia, but yet I had been to a regular doctor and been told I didn't have that. They ran all the blood tests, told me I didn't really have anything. And I knew pretty much that there was some kind of a thyroid issue. There had to be because of some of my issues with weight loss. And I looked up all the symptoms. I was like, there's got to be some. But they're like, no, it's normal, it's fine. At that point, I was like, yeah, it's not. Sorry. I need to kind of look into something else. And of course, the doctor didn't even think to recommend food intolerances or food sensitivities at all. I mean, food didn't even come up in the conversation. He was just like, oh, well, just go try this other allergy drug. And it was like, well, I've been on that one. I've been on just about every allergy drug there is. I don't, and so at that point in time, I began this journey to find some other kind of practitioner that would look at food sensitivities, maybe even food allergies, because some of what I was experiencing was so severe, I was wondering if I was more on the allergy side even for some of these things. And I just thought, okay, what am I going to do? So, after asking around to a few people, I didn't seem to really be getting anywhere. I got some recommendations, but some of them were either too expensive, the practitioners were too far away, and they didn't really specialize in food sensitivity. So I just finally went to our good friend Google, and I just Googled, and I think I typed in food allergy testing Salt Lake City, because that's where I live. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, and it happens to be the very first place that came up. That doesn't necessarily mean I advocate for that or think that the very first result you'll get in Google all the time is the best.
Right.
This just happened to be the first. And it was a clinic that combines Western medicine with Eastern medicine. And one of the services that they offer is what's called the ALCAT blood test for food sensitivities. And I don't know if they do it in the UK or in other countries. Have you heard of it?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, so I think the lab's in Florida, so I think it may only be a U.S. thing, but in any case, it was life-changing. In a lot of ways, I had so many food sensitivities that I just about died when I got the results. A lot of my favorite foods, things that I really, really like to eat, were on that list, and over the last year or so, through some of the Chinese herbs and acupuncture and some other things, I can now tolerate small amounts of some of those things, but I still have some things I really can't have. But it has totally revolutionized my entire health and has made me realize that the statement really is true that food is your medicine and you are what you eat.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that's quite it's amazing the number of people that I've talked to who have who've had such profound results when they've changed what they eat, and the kind of maybe years that they've been suffering with something, and then suddenly they make a change and they're like a different person.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said your 11-year-old son was the one that pointed you out to that. Does he have a lot of food intolerances and food sensitivities, or?
In fact, no, not a lot. And I mean, so our experience is not quite like yours, but he had for a long time. I mean, maybe since he was like 2 or 3, from time to time, he would have like really loose stools, you know, and it didn't seem to bother him. It didn't seem to be painful or anything. But it obviously reached a stage where he would get a bit embarrassed about it, or, you know, he would tell me um, that, you know, and I would kind of go, oh, well, you know, sometimes that just happens. And, you know, it didn't, like I say, it didn't seem to be causing him any distress particularly. But over the years, it seemed to get worse. And we noticed that, I mean, he loved cereals, like breakfast cereals. And he would eat those quite a lot for snacks and stuff like that. And hey, you know, it's easy. He would come in from school and he would be hungry, so he would grab a bowl of cereal. And, you know, he ate a lot of bread. Again, you know, it's easy. It fills you up. It's, you know, and here in the UK, bread is huge. You know, everybody has bread all the time. You have to have bread in the house. So you don't really think much of it. And I wasn't particularly aware of any food intolerance in the family particularly. So it didn't really occur to me especially that this was a food intolerance. But we noticed a bit of a pattern where if he'd eaten lots and lots of cereal and not much fruit and veg, that he would get a sore tummy. And he would start complaining of having a sore tummy, and he would get diarrhea and stuff like that. And I did see my doctor about it, and he kind of said, oh, well, you know, it's probably nothing, you know, I wouldn't worry about it, this can happen with children. You know, it was just a kind of, yeah, you're kind of wasting my time, just go away. And in fact, what happened with us was I started to become much more aware of food intolerance from talking to friends. So in fact, when we were out in Canada last year, we stayed with some friends who are gluten-free. And before we got there, they'd said to us, look, you know, just to let you know, we're gluten-free, so, you know, is that okay when you come to stay? And we said, oh, yeah, no problem, it's fine. We had a great few days with them, but we talked to them quite a lot about why they're gluten-free. And it turned out that our friend Ryan, who we were staying with, had for most of his life had stomach pains every day. He would eat and he would get stomach pains. And he just thought, yeah, that's just what happens. That's just me. And when he met his wife, she said to him, well, you know, I don't think that that's normal. I don't think that that's actually, that you know, that I don't get stomach pains all the time. I'm not like curled up in a ball in pain when I've eaten. You know, I think maybe there's something in this. So they had adopted a gluten-free diet, and partly because a friend of the wife's was celiac. So, you know, it was kind of easy for that. I think they were eating a lot of gluten-free anyway. And it changed his life. He was suddenly pain-free, feeling great. You know, he was just, he had a completely different attitude. He felt really healthy and everything else. So I was quite taken by this, not making the connection straight away with my son at all, but, you know, I was like, oh yeah, you know, clearly this is something that happens to people, right?
Yeah.
We then had another friend who had discovered he was suffering with arthritic pain at like 40, and his wife, who's actually a physiotherapist, had started to do some research into it, because she was saying, well, there isn't like a physiological reason for this arthritic pain. Your joints aren't actually worn down, but, you know, there's something going on. The doctors had all said, well, we don't know, we're not really sure, kind of like you, didn't do any tests for food intolerance at all. So she decided that she was going to take matters into her own hands. They did a lot of work eliminating anything that might be causing the problem from his diet, and eventually they hit on the triggers. So again, through removing certain things, wheat being the main one, from his diet, his pain is almost gone, and, you know, he's like a different person. If he eats wheat now, he has the pain. The next day he will be in pain. So it's like, you know, again, you're kind of going, wow, there is really something in this. This, you know, food is so important. And eventually, having spoken to, I don't know, several people who'd had similar kind of situations, the penny finally dropped. And I was like, you know what? We eat a lot of wheat. You know, it's just the British diet has a lot of wheat in it. And snacks particularly, breakfast particularly, lunch, sandwiches, this kind of thing. That's just what people eat, right? So I thought, maybe we need to do something about this. I wonder what would happen if we just removed wheat from our diet. I wonder what would happen. And guess what happened? Suddenly, my little boy, who had had sore tummies so often, was now only suffering with a sore tummy if he'd had a lot of wheat. So, you know, we had like a couple of weeks where we cut it down. You know, he was like, there was trace amounts of wheat in his diet. He got better. We had a weekend where we went away, and he indulged in a little bit of bread, and, you know, was kind of eating some wheat again, and boom, sore tummy. So I was like, that's all the proof I need, really, that there is a link here. You know, it's far too clear cut. But the interesting thing for me was that I noticed a difference in myself as well. So I had suffered with IBS for, you know, a number of years, on and off, and it always seemed to be worse when I was stressed. At one stage, it was really bad. I was getting heartburn and all sorts of things, and a cough, actually. Funny you should mention a cough. But taking wheat out of my diet, suddenly I felt so much better. I wasn't getting bloated. I wasn't uncomfortable. You know, it just made such a difference. And then my mum came to stay, and I explained to her, look, Mum, you know, we don't have bread in the house now, just to let you know. So she was like, oh, that's fine, you know, I'll just manage without for the weekend. After a weekend of not eating the amount of wheat she normally ate, she had noticed a difference in herself as well.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I mean, this was like, and I mean, I know that there are often links in families that, you know, these things happen. But yeah, she was like, yeah, okay. But for a long time, I think people had been suggesting to her that maybe she changed her diet slightly. And when she was not forced to do it, but when she did, just because that's what we were doing, it made a big difference to her as well. And she's continued to do that. So,
wow. Yeah, I actually have the ALCAT test that I mentioned actually measures your intolerances and sensitivities at various levels, but then they also look at if you have anything that's specifically like an actual allergy problem. And I not only have severe gluten intolerance, but I actually have a pretty severe allergy to wheat. So I mean, mine's beyond stomach issues. I get brain fog and dizziness, and I actually bring out over rashes if I get any wheat. So it's like pretty severe. And I think a lot of people don't realize the impact that it can have until it almost gets really drastic. I actually even, in the time that I've started this journey, I've started to become much more aware of how many problems people have with some of these things. And I actually even met a lady once that said that she actually ends up in the ER if she gets gluten in her at all, like just even a little bit. And she was talking to somebody once that had probably some kind of a gluten sensitivity, and the person was like, oh, I don't know how you do it. I could never be off gluten. And then she's like, well, I think if you ended up in the ER when you ate it, I think you'd try it. It's like, you know, some people.
I think it's the thing that really strikes me. I always thought, I thought I was one of those people who could just eat whatever I wanted. You know, I was just like, I don't have any intolerance. I'm fine, you know. And I thought, wow, I don't know how people who can't eat, you know, dairy or can't eat gluten or whatever, I don't know how they cope, because that would just be so hard to do. And actually, the reality is, even though, we're not as bad as having to go to the ER, it's amazing how quickly you can adapt. You know, we were a family who never had no bread in the house. As soon as the loaf of bread was getting towards the end, one of us would be out at the store buying more bread. And I would have said to you, well, I don't, because, one, I like bread. Two, what else do you eat? Like, I need to be able to eat sandwiches at lunchtime and stuff like that. And, even just seeing that difference after a couple of weeks, that had me going, okay, actually we can do this. And within a month, I totally got used to not having bread in the house. I developed alternatives, and it was totally fine. And I think actually when I've talked to people who have had, most of the people I've talked to, not all, I do have an example of somebody I met who was really struggling. But actually, a lot of the time, I think it's very easy to, if you allow yourself to be positive about it, to have that positive attitude, and just to get used to this new way of doing things. I have to say as well, the really interesting thing that we've discovered is my husband, who's never noticed any sort of intolerance to any food particularly, and who would have said, when we stopped eating wheat, he would have said, you know what, I haven't noticed any difference in myself. He does notice a difference, but and that really came out. He went out with some friends, and they went and had pizza and beer. So he had a whole pizza and a few beers, and the next day he felt horrible.
I bet.
Really horrible. And he was like, and he didn't sleep either. That was the other thing, is that night he slept really badly. And it wasn't just, I don't think it was just the beer. But, and he was like, well, okay, I kind of OD'd on wheat last night. I ate way more than I would ever now, and I really feel horrible. So, and that in somebody who, apparently doesn't have an intolerance, you kind of go, yeah, okay, we're maybe not designed to eat this.
Yeah,
not
really,
in the quantity.
exactly. I was actually looking, there was somebody that sent out a link on Twitter a while back, and I may have favorited it or something, but she was saying that there's been at least one study and maybe another study that had been done that said for some people, insomnia may be the only symptom of food intolerance that you have. Right. So a lot of people don't realize it, that, you have these people that have these chronic issues of insomnia, and they can never sleep at night, and they can't figure out why, and so then they go on drugs. And sometimes, now that I know what I know, I'm looking at it going, I wonder if these people have got a food intolerance issue instead.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I think the idea of food as medicine is a really fascinating one. I think it's something that there's such a lot of exploration to be done there, and some of the stuff that we put in our bodies is kind of scary, I think.
Yes. Today's day and age, with the processed food and everything else, there's been this infographic going around Facebook that I saw that said the problem with our food today is that we don't eat food, we eat food-like substances instead of actually real food. And I definitely think that's part of our problem. We're not eating real food the way it was actually originally supposed to be.
Right. Definitely. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I really love talking about is what is how it's impacted on my life, but in a positive way. Because actually, like I say, the impact that it's had on me in a negative way is like, well, there isn't really any major negative impact. I had a few weeks early on where I was like, oh, this is really hard. How do you feed a growing boy without giving him bread. You know, what do I give him for lunches? What do I give him for this, that, and the other? But that was fairly short-lived. We found alternatives, and he's been great about it as well. He's been really, really, you know, mature about it all, which is fantastic. And he's actually very sensible about what he eats when he goes to friends and stuff like that. But I think for me, one of the really surprising side effects of finding that actually I'm a bit intolerant to certain foods is actually I've realized that we are so resilient. You know, people are so resilient, and that when you can rise to a challenge and meet it, you can turn it into something that's really positive, and it makes you go, you know what, I can do anything. If I can deal with this, then think of all the other things that I can deal with. You know, it gives you confidence, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's definitely what it's done for me. You know, I think, I mean, one of my favorite things to do, I'm a black belt in karate, and
awesome.
and that has been, so that's been a real, that whole process for me. I didn't start that until I was in my 30s, so you know, I'm quite proud of that. But you know, the whole kind of rising to the challenge thing with that is huge. And I always think that if you can rise to a challenge in one area, then that gives you the skills, the mental strength, or whatever, that you can rise to the challenge in all sorts of other areas as well. You know, so I think that's been one of the biggest takeaways for me of this whole experience, which, you know, we're still learning, we're still going through it, we're still discovering, you know, new ways to look at things, and you know, I'm not completely convinced that we've nailed it all yet, that we know exactly what all the intolerances are. So we're still facing that challenge, but I'm not daunted by it, you know.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely not defeated.
Absolutely. And for me, a couple of things that happened for me too is that I was almost before 100 pounds overweight from what my normal average weight should be based on my height and everything else. And I lost about 50 pounds in the first 2 months that I went on that diet, if you will. And so, and I have gained a little back, but you know, and so I've still got a little ways to go, but for the most part, I mean, it had a huge impact. I went down a size and a half in clothing sizes, and everywhere I go, people are just like, wow, your skin looks so much clearer, you have so much more energy, you look like, they're like, what did you do to lose all that weight? And so, you know, it's kind of made me realize even more the impact, well, yeah, like the impact that food intolerances have, but the thing I totally agree with you that, you know, you go through challenges that helps you rise above it and helps you actually learn how to help other people too, because at first I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like one of the worst things that could happen to me. What am I going to do if I go to a party or my family's cooking dinner and I can't eat half the things that are in this food? You know, how am I ever going to eat out in a restaurant ever again? All these other things. It's helped me realize that I'm going to be much more powerful, and actually am much more powerful and much more able to help other people as a health coach, because I've been through all this. You know, I understand what the impact really of food is on you and how to help other people overcome that. So yeah, absolutely, I definitely agree that, you know, trials and challenges make you stronger for sure.
Right, and you can't help other people if you've never faced these things yourself. You know, it's like, I think actually for somebody who is facing that challenge and who is at that point where they're going, you know, this is horrible, you know, when they're at that point where they think, I'm never going to be able to eat anything I like again, you know, having somebody who's been through it to talk to and who can say to you, actually, you know what, it is going to be okay. You know, if I can do this, then seriously, so can you. There's nothing magical about me. I'm just a person. But actually, I've got some ideas and some strategies and some techniques that are going to help you to be able to to get through it as well, and to come out the other side going, you know what, this is almost the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think, I was one of those people, I ate avocados every day, and avocados were on my list. So I had to go 4 months with no avocados. And then, even now, I still can really only have one maybe every week or so. And so that's kind of bipolar people. I'm like, if I can go 4 months without avocados, I know that you can give this up. It's kind of funny, but, And I was really severely addicted to cheese, which I now can't really have hardly ever.
Okay.
Because I have a whey intolerance, so it's like, oh dear. Get rid of the milk, the cheese, all the milk stuff. Eggs aren't a problem for me though, thank goodness, because that was really a pain.
Yeah. 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 I mean, the time that I was really struck by it was when I was when we were quite early on in this process, and I was in the supermarket, and I was standing at the shelves where, like, these two tiny little shelves in the supermarket which have the gluten-free and dairy-free and whatever free stuff on these shelves. And this other lady was stood there next to me, an older lady, and she said, "Oh," she said, "you're here too." And I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "What is it with you then?" And I was like, "Well, we're trying out being wheat-free and gluten-free for a while." She was like, "Oh, yeah." She said, "Yeah, I've just been diagnosed with celiac." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's, that must be challenging." She goes, "Yeah, and I can't have dairy either, and I may be borderline diabetic, so I'm just waiting to find out, the test results from that." And I was like, "Oh, right, okay." And this lady, I felt so sad for her, because she was so down. She was just defeated by it. And she was just like, I stand here looking at these two shelves, and I know that I can eat these things, but I walk around the rest of the supermarket and I just don't know what I can have. I don't know, and I go and ask at the counter about the chicken, it was like some kind of fried chicken thing. She was like, "I don't know, is that gluten free?" And they don't know behind the counter. And I'm thinking, oh wow, you could just go buy chicken, like just some chicken.
Regular chicken, yeah.
Like just regular chicken, like with nothing on it. And I was like, wow, this. I felt for her, because she was having to completely rethink everything, and she didn't have the tools or the knowledge to help her to really, like, scratch everything she thought about food before and start thinking about it, differently, and to just have that kind of, oh, okay, you know what, I'm not sure about that fried chicken, so why don't I just go and buy some regular chicken, because regular chicken, that's going to be fine, right?
Yeah. You can learn how to cook it, use olive oil, some spices, and
right, exactly. And I think that was the thing that really made me think, yeah, this can go one of two ways. You can go thinking, oh, you know what, my life might as well be over, because I can't deal with this, and this is so horrible, and look at all the stuff I can't eat. Or you can say, okay, I see this as an opportunity for me to relearn about food, to relearn about what things taste good, and to re-educate my brain and my palate, and to learn to do things completely differently, and actually to make the positive changes in my life that are going to do me so much good. And like you say, it's not just now I no longer have these horrible symptoms, but now I have more energy, I have lost 50 pounds, all these things that I've been thinking all this time, oh, I feel really tired, or oh, I wish I was slimmer, or whatever it is, these things actually can happen almost by accident.
Yeah.
Just by making those changes.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, yeah, for sure. So we've been going for a while now, so we probably don't want to go too much longer, or people will not watch to the end. But
of course. So I have a.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I have a gift that I want to share with people. You know, if there are people out there who are thinking, yeah, you know, I'm in the slightly defeated camp, or I'm actually struggling to get to that point. I want to feel more positive about this, but I don't really know how. And what I've done is I have an ebook called 10 Steps to a More Positive You. Now, this isn't specifically for people with food intolerance. This is really for anybody who wants to try and develop a slightly more, you know, positive outlook. You might be facing a challenge. You might be, you know, just feeling a bit kind of down. And you can get this ebook by going to, now let me just make sure I get this right. So the website to go to is humannature.com/free-resources, as in free-resources, /ALB, as in AnnaLaura Brown, 10 steps. So I'm going to read that again. It's humannature.com/free-resources/ALB 10 steps.
Awesome.
And right there on the web page is a little link to click, and you can put in your email address, and you will get that that PDF ebook emailed to you. Okay.
Awesome.
It's
That's
a really
great.
nice little. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's great, Liz. And we will actually, if you are watching this video on YouTube, you will find the link in the description for the video. If you're watching it on my blog at AnnaLauraBrown.com, I will actually link to it below too, so that they don't have to remember to write it all down or type it out. It'll just be there.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So it's a really short, little punchy thing. It's not like a big, enormous tome. It has really practical steps that you can go through to find ways to develop a more positive outlook on the challenges that you might be facing.
Awesome. Okay, well, Liz, well, thanks so much for sharing. I think we've had a great conversation. I think that's going to be really helpful to people. So, again, do go ahead, if you are watching this video on YouTube, go ahead and check out the links in the description, or we'll probably put them on, you know, the screen so people can see as well. Or you can go to my blog at AnnaLauraBrown.com, and there I have a lot of helpful information about how to deal with allergies and food intolerances, as well as other health issues, and you'll find the link to Liz's ebook, which sounds awesome. I'm probably going to go there myself and get it, and I can read through it. I'm sure I'll learn something from it.
It's been great talking to you, AnnaLaura. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Have a good rest of your day.
And you.